Brazil declared an animal health emergency for 6 months after authorities detected its first ever case of avian influenza virus in wild birds. And Russia's Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin arrived in China for a 2-day official visit with the aim of enhanced business relations and promoting a political and peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis. The presidents of Indonesia, Joko Widodo, and Iran, Ebrahim Raisi, signed a preferential trade agreement. From the headquarters of TeleSUR English in Havana, Cuba, this is From the South. I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada, and these are the news. Cuban electoral authorities set the details for next Sunday's provincial polls to elect governors and vice governors after the National Electoral Council validated the dynamic test in 167 municipalities of the country. In these elections, the delegates to the municipal assemblies of the People's Power meet in their own right to elect, by means of free, equal, direct, and a secret vote, the provincial governor and vice governor. In accordance with the Magna Carta of the nation, in each territory there is a provincial government of people's power, which functions in close connection with the people. The provincial governors and the vice governors are elected to rule in a 5-year term at the proposal of the President of the Republic. And on Tuesday, the Cuban Medical Mission celebrates its 60th anniversary, an initiative of Commander Fidel Castro that materialized and has contributed to the health of millions of citizens around the world in the 165 countries that have benefited from it. The first brigade of doctors went to Algeria and Chile in 1963. Cuba, a small Caribbean island suffering from the longest blockade ever imposed, offered free international medical assistance to poor countries in the Latin America region and Africa. Also, the Henry Reeve International Contingent of doctors specialized in disaster situations and serious epidemics, created by the Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz in September 2005 to help the U.S. victims of Hurricane Katrina, has been present with 28 brigades in 22 countries, assisting the victims of floods, hurricanes, earthquakes, as well as epidemics and Ebola outbreaks in West Africa. During the COVID-19 epidemic, Cuba sent medical brigades to Antigua and Barbuda, Andorra, Angola, Barbados, Belize, Cape Verde, Dominica, Grenada, Haiti, Honduras, Italy, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Qatar, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Suriname, South Africa, Togo, and Venezuela. It is worth remembering that Cuba, despite its own scarcities and attacks of hostile governments, has never stopped providing medical assistance to those in need.
It's been 60 years since Cuba began its history of international medical collaboration, which is the most important social achievement Cuba has given to the world, and an expression of the international solidarity spirit of the Cuban people. As early as May 1960, on a day like this, on the aftermath of an earthquake that shook the Chilean city of Valdivia, Cuba sent its first medical brigade. And shortly afterwards, at the inauguration ceremony of the medicine school Victoria de Girón, then Cuban Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro announced to the world that the decision had been made that Cuba would be providing international medical assistance whenever necessary.
And the Minister of the Supreme Court of Justice of Mexico warned that the decision of invalidate a federal executive's agreement on public interest and the national security of certain public works may be unconstitutional. Minister Yasmin Esquivel ratified her position in the plenary session of the High Court on the controversy promoted by the National Institute for Transparency, Access to Information and Personal Data Protection against the agreement of the federal executive. When referring to the more than 10 precedents issued by the second chamber of the High Court, where the legal consequences of the annulment were limited to the parties involved in the procedure, Esquivel warned that it cannot imply its definite dismissal from the judiciary.
In this way, the decision to annul the agreement cannot, in any case, be pleaded by any other person outside the litigation, since the agreement has not been qualified by a majority decision of this court as a general rule. It is clear that it cannot be expelled from the legal order with general effects either, as this would go against what has already been voted, and will also contradict the Constitution, which categorically rules that in these cases, the resolution of the Supreme Court of Justice of the nation would only be effective to the...
And the election season in Guatemala just took a surprising turn, as a leading presidential candidate, Carlos Pineda, was suspended from the race, calling the recent move as undemocratic. After the decision, the Guatemalan entrepreneur, who was leading opinion polls for the upcoming presidential elections in June, took legal action by filing an appeal with the country's highest court to overturn the suspension of his candidacy. In a message on his Twitter account, Pineda accused the court of kicking him out of the ballot because he refused to be an ally of corruption. On a shock move, the court ruled that the candidate of the conservative Prosperidad Ciudadana party could not participate in the elections due to non-compliance with rules governing the nomination process, such as the failure to collect signatures from party delegates and file a required financial report.
We believe that elections should be held at the ballot box and not in the courts. In Guatemala, there have been situations that indicate we are moving towards or on the way to a dictatorship. In a dictatorship, freedom of expression is vetoed, which is a constitutional right. The media, we have already seen this, and there is also political persecution, which is what I want to demonstrate at this time.
Violence against social leaders in Colombia has been on the rise despite governmental efforts, as the new report shows an increase in violent crimes year on year. According to the foundation Paz y Reconciliación, violence soared in the midst of the struggle for the presidency in the country. In 2022 alone, the organization registered 180 assassinations of social, environmental, and indigenous leaders. They stress that the total peace plan of the current government is affected by inefficient security policies in the territories. Despite the drop registered in the first 3 months of the year, according to INDEPAS, 66 social leaders have already been assassinated in 2023 in Colombia. And Brazil declared an animal health emergency for 6 months after authorities detected its first ever case of avian influenza virus in wild birds. According to a document signed by Agriculture Minister Carlos Favaro, the South American nation, the world's biggest chicken meat exporter, recorded at least 8 cases of the H5N1 virus in wild birds, including 1 in Rio de Janeiro state and 7 in the neighboring state of Espírito Santo. In this sense, Favaro recalled infection by this subtype of avian flu in wild birds does not trigger trade bans based on guidelines of the World Organization for Animal Health. To tackle the current situation, the Agriculture Ministry created an emergency operations center to coordinate, plan, and evaluate national actions related to avian influenza. Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at TeleSUR English, where you will find news in different formats, news updates and more. Other stories coming up, stay with us. Welcome back. On Monday, Brazil's Ministry of Foreign Affairs established contact with the ambassador of Spain to express its dissatisfaction and concern for the incident of racist advances against soccer Brazilian player Vinicius Jr. The administration of Lula da Silva pointed out it is not indifferent to last weekend's racist aggressions against Vinicius Jr. On Monday night, it was agreed to leave the emblematic Christ of Corcovado in the dark as a sign of solidarity with the football player and in repudiation to fascism and racism, as it had been qualified by the international community, and it is not the first time that an act like this happens against a Brazilian player. But this time, even the president, Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, has raised his voice to denounce it.
not possible that almost in the middle of the 21st century we have racial prejudice gaining strength in several football stadiums in Europe. I think it is important that FIFA, that the Spanish league, that other league of other countries take serious measures because we cannot allow fascism and racism inside football stadiums.
The main teachers' unions in Romania entered on Tuesday into a general strike that mobilized 150,000 teachers and around 70,000 school support staff, according to the organizers. Romanian teachers demand a salary increase as their pay currently stands at $522 and is below the national average salary of $804. Announcements made by the Minister of Labor, Marius Budai, about an urgent ordinance to increase salaries were not enough to paralyze the union's decision. It was also learned that a draft of new laws on pre-university and higher education entered the Senate on Tuesday in Bucharest, the country's capital. The teachers rejected the government's offers, which they described as welfare, and demanded a substantial increase in salaries. The United Nations Educational, Scientific and Cultural Organization, UNESCO, will establish a Category 1 institute on science education in Shanghai, China. According to a resolution adopted by UNESCO's Executive Board during its 216th session, it concluded that establishing such an institute with a focus on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, also known as STEM, will strengthen the organization's leadership in this field. In this sense, the board further added that it will also contribute to the implementation of UNESCO's mission and the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development. UNESCO's Category 1 institutes aim to build scientific capacity in member states and serve as thought laboratories, standard setters, and international cooperation platforms in their respective functional areas. And Montenegro's President Jakov Milatovic praised China for its important role in the international arena and expressed expectations that Montenegro will continue to play an active role under the Belt and Road Initiative and in the cooperation between China and Central and Eastern European countries.
I think the Belt and Road Initiative proposed by China has yielded remarkable results, which has especially been demonstrated by some development projects, including transport, infrastructure, and energy projects, and I believe there is still a scope for improvement. Montenegro has played an important role during the period, and I believe that we will continue to play an active role in the cooperation between China and Central and Eastern European countries going forward.
The Prime Minister of Russia, Mikhail Mishustin, arrived on Tuesday in China for a two-day official visit to enhance business relations and promoting a diplomatic and peaceful solution to the Ukrainian crisis. As part of this trip to Shanghai, Mishustin visited the Chinese state oil and gas company Sinopec. According to Russian government sources, he toured the company's facilities alongside Russian Deputy Prime Minister Alexander Novak. Chinese imports from Russia, mainly oil and gas, increased by 49% last year to $76.4 billion, according to customs data. The Global Times newspaper reported that Russia overtook Saudi Arabia as China's largest supplier of foreign oil in January and February. China can buy Russian energy without triggering Western sanctions, banning or limiting imports to the United States, Europe, and Japan.
Thank you very much, Mikhail Vladimirovich. In fact, we have a really important partnership with the Sinopec company. This is one of the biggest companies in China and in the world. Today, we are actively cooperating on the development of the supply of catalysts to our country, on the joint production together with the Research Institute, where you are today, Mikhail Vladimirovich.
In this context, Russian Prime Minister Mikhail Mishustin affirmed that the deepening of Russian-Chinese ties will have a positive effect on the economies of both countries at a business forum during his visit to Shanghai. China and Russia ramp up economic cooperation and diplomatic contacts, with their strategic partnership having grown closer since the beginning of the armed conflict in Ukraine.
I'm sure that this year we will accomplish the goals set by the head of our states, Putin and Xi Jinping, to get the mutual turnover to 200 billion. Last year, Russia was subjected to sanctions pressure on an unprecedented scale. We withheld and also continue progressive development. I'm convinced that the deepening of Russia-China's ties and the increase of cooperation will have a positive effect on the strengthening of both countries' economies.
Now we move on to other topics. The Inquisitive Committee of Russia on Tuesday opened a criminal case for the incursion of a Ukrainian sabotage group in the Belgorod province. The case was initiated on the basis of the criminal code of the country, which defines the event in the Grai-Voron district as a terrorist attack, an attempt on the lives of security officers, attempted murder, destruction and intentional damage to property, among others. The terrorists used artillery and mortar shells against civilian facilities. The region has an anti-terrorist operation law that provides for special measures to ensure the safety of citizens. Since Russia launched its special military operation in Ukraine on February 22, 2022, several border regions, including Belgorod, reported material damage and civilian casualties from shells fired from the Ukrainian territory. And TeleSUR English continues to grow. You can now tune in from 33 different African countries using StarSat. Dial 461 and enjoy our Latin American alternative broadcast. One final short break and we'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan reaffirmed that one of the main tasks, if he wins the second round of the presidential elections, will be the development of a new constitution. In an interview with TRT Haber TV channel, the current head of state recalled that the country is under the 1982 legislation, which was promoted by the military and is the outcome of a coup in 1980. In this sense, Erdogan clarified that this issue will be assessed first within the alliance of his party, the Justice and Development Party, and then in dialogue with other coalitions. President Erdogan also said a new constitution will be one of the biggest initiatives in the new era of his administration and is a way to save democracy for Turkey. During the next round of the presidential elections, Erdogan will dispute his current position with his opposition rival Kemal Kılıçdaroğlu, who obtained in the first round of May 14th, Erdogan obtained 49.52% and his contestant 44.88%. The third place candidate, Sinan Ogan, who obtained about 5% of the votes, has already promised to support Erdogan in the second round. On Tuesday in Jakarta, the presidents of Indonesia and Iran signed a preferential trade agreement. Visiting Iranian President Ebrahim Raisi said Tehran aims at boosting its international trade alliances to try and offset the economic impact of heavy Western and international sanctions. Raisi's two-day visit to Indonesia, the second largest economy in Southeast Asia, comes as the European Union enforced new sanctions this week on Iran's Revolutionary Guard. According to the Indonesian Trade Ministry, under the new agreement, Iran will provide easier access for Indonesian exports as vegetable oil, cocoa, coffee, and tobacco. In turn, Jakarta will lower tariffs on Iranian exports to Indonesia, including oil and its derivative products, minerals, chemicals, and iron.
We believe that sanctions and treaties cannot stop us in any way from cooperating and communicating with neighboring countries, Muslim countries and countries that aren't aligned with us in various areas. We agreed to continue supporting the fight of the Palestinians and to resolve the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan by keep demanding access to education for women, in Afghanistan, as well as providing humanitarian aid. Today, Indonesia and Iran have signed the Preferential Trade Agreement, or PTA, which I hope will further trade between our two countries.
The United Nations Children's Fund, UNICEF, warned that children in the Horn of Africa are living through an unprecedented large-scale hunger, displacement, water scarcity, and insecurity. According to the international organism, more than 7 million children under the age of 5 remain malnourished and in need of urgent nutrition aid, and over 1.9 million boys and girls are at risk of dying from severe malnutrition. As the region comes out of one of the worst droughts in 40 years, vulnerable communities have lost cattle, crops, and entire livelihoods over the past 3 years of failed rains. While the rains postponed the worst, they have also led to floods, as the extremely thirsty ground is unable to absorb large quantities of water, leading to further displacement, increased risk of disease, and crop damage. A Senegalese court on Tuesday resumed the trial of the opposition leader Ousmane Sonko, accused of rape, who failed to attend the hearing for the second consecutive time. Police in the capital, Dakar, placed a security cordon around the courtroom, fearing an upsurge in clashes sparked by the case. However, they confirmed no incident occurred. Sonko, popular among young people, has branded the trial a political plot aimed at scuttling his bid for the presidency in 2024. He is charged with rape and death threats against a local beauty salon employee. The trial was set to begin on May 16th, but it was immediately adjourned until May 23rd, following his failure to appear. And like this, we have come to the end of this news brief. But remember, you can find this and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And also, if you feel so inclined, please join us on social media for all the latest news. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm your anchor, Gladys Quesada. Thank you for watching.